quickly. The budget measure on the National Forestry Industry Plan, have you covered that already?
Yes, we did talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
In particular, I wanted to just get an idea of how that money is being distributed, particularly, whether Western Australia has access to that pool of money, and has that been covered?
Not that specifically, no.
Only because it can't be at this stage.
Right.
Just to give you a bit of a background, we made the decision as a federal government, made a policy decision that we were going to support the forestry industry into the future by the development of this plan, which signalled to the marketplace that we were deadly serious about the future of this industry. That was in September last year. As part of backing that measure in, we went through a budget process, which is the
Yes.
subject of you're discussing. And we're just in the final stages of our very rigorous consultation program that we've taken over the last 9 months to put back to the industry collective at the end of next week, and also the forestry ministers from each of the states at the end of next week, which will then give us the final sign-off to proceed to what that plan is going to look like and what it's going to incorporate.
So the negotiations currently underway will
Absolutely.
feed into... Okay.
But one of the things I did mention to Senator Rice was that, or maybe Senator McCarthy, is that we are seeking very much to leverage this money as much as we possibly can, either with state governments or with the industry, because $20 million can go a long way when you're leveraging it, doesn't go very far when you don't. So certainly we would be looking to the governments around the country, the state governments and Western Australia included, to see what opportunities we had to work with the state government and with the industry in Western Australia to maximise the output of this plan, and particularly getting more trees in the ground, because that seems to be the fundamental issue at the moment, is that we've got an international or a global industry that's going absolutely gangbusters, huge demand, but we've just got to get the economics right so we get the trees in the ground.
So this pool of money could potentially see a sort of a co-investment type model to leverage private sector investment in the forestry sector?
Well, look, I mean, without talking about the elephant in the room, and one of the things that we don't particularly like, the learned experience of MIS schemes, we were certainly looking to come up with much more sophisticated and less market damaging mechanisms by which we would encourage industry to invest. And so that's the process and the body of work we're doing at the moment, is to work out how we can genuinely give the signal to the marketplace that we're serious.
Yep.
But without creating a distortion that may have unintended consequences.
No, absolutely. And Western Australia went through the, as many other
As
states
we all
did,
did.
the aftermath
Yeah.
of that situation.
And actually, can I just follow on from that? And
Yep.
one of the things that we've been really clear and has been, very clearly stated to us as part of the consultation is about, it's not just about having the right trees and the right quantity, but making sure they're in the right place. So a call will go out to industry, and already has gone out to industry, to say, you need to decide where it is that you want forestry to occur, because there's such a lot of infrastructure that supports the forestry sector, particularly if we want to do value-add forestry products and innovation. There's so much infrastructure that supports it. You can't just put trees anywhere. And we had an experience in South Australia where, through a previous scheme, we ended up with trees on Kangaroo Island, but no possible way of getting the things off Kangaroo Island. So we've got this asset that, if it was able to be realised, is worth millions and millions of dollars.
Right.
But in the absence of being able to get them effectively, efficiently or environmentally, soundly off Kangaroo Island, they're of no value whatsoever, apart from there's a lot of happy koalas over there. So we're very keen to make sure that not only have we got the right amount of trees, and the right trees, but making sure they're in the right place.
Yep.
So the concept of hubs.
Correct.
What
That's
drives
right.
that.
Yep.
And I think there
Yep.
was an experience similar to that in the southwest of Western Australia, where there were some stranded assets
Yes.
that
Yeah.
logistically became
Yep.
problematic to harvest.
That's right.
How are, and I'm having a look at the description of the budget measure. It talks about small forest growers. What is a small forest grower? What's the boundary there? But is this private plantations?
Yes.
Or?
Yes. And farm forestry. Yes.
Okay.
One of the things that we saw, particularly in Tasmania, has been using farm forestry as a sort of are supplementary to your farming business, sort of almost like a growing superannuation. The opportunity for our farmers to mitigate against, by having more products than just running their cows or their sheep, but actually planting trees, and that obviously is good, carbon sequestration, etc., etc. But it does give them another potential long-term source of income, or superannuation, send the kids to school, whatever it happens to be. So part of the plan is to make sure that we're not just saying to the big guys, put lots of trees in the ground, but we give the broader opportunity for the farming sector to participate in this, the Indigenous sector to participate. And the other thing is that the national, actually it was Meat and Livestock Australia, through their relationship with the National Farmers Federation, have come back with a goal that by 2050 they want the meat and livestock industry in Australia to be carbon neutral. And whilst they're going through a lot of genetic work with the animals themselves, one of the ways that they can make their industry carbon neutral is obviously to embrace forestry as part of the suite of tools that the agricultural sector can use, so that they've got, that they can meet their targets. So there's a whole heap of things that are playing into, not just going into big plantations, but actually seeing the farming sector to embrace forestry as part of their business plan.
Okay. It's not necessarily an industry that would lead itself to significant consolidation, particularly that farm-based, I guess, sub-enterprise. Do we have a good sense on, the stocks and flows? In the grains industry, there's at least a reasonable sense on how much is being produced every year, how much is sitting in storage, how much is being exported. Livestock is tracked to some degree. Do we have a sense on what the industry base on the ground actually is?
I mean, Ms Lutter obviously will have more detailed understanding, but my understanding is that more broadly, when you're talking about the sort of the commercial side of the industry, we've got a pretty good handle, and that's where we get reports like the ABARES report. But I think when it comes to underutilised, non-used farm forestry, I think that one of the bodies of work that we have to do is to actually get out there and get a handle on what it actually looks like. Anecdotally, it's been suggested by industry that it could be anything up to a quarter of the new trees that we need could be found through this source. So it's a pretty significant, and we're talking, 100,000 hectares of potential forestry could be found through this means. So quite a big bit, but we do need to do some work to get a better handle on it.
Okay. Ms Lauder, did you have anything to
completely
say?
agree with the Minister.
That's a very wise thing to do.
The commercial plantations, we have a good handle on that, and ABARES reports regularly on that. With native forestry that the states and state agencies undertake, again, we know that very well. But as far as forest resources that are on either farmland or other private land, we don't know that very well at this stage. So some of the one of the things that we're looking at through the plan and through this funding is trying to get a better handle on that.
And do we have, through ABARES, I guess, a reasonably good handle on where the international market's going in terms of demand? Is it wood chip? Is it, what's the balance of the requirement from international players?
They do track that, and so they do report on that regularly. And in fact, the report that was released this morning does talk about sort of our export markets and what products are that they're looking for and are increasing, and which countries they are. As I said before, I'll have to ask ABARES to attend our session in future. But that would be in the report that would have just been handed out to you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so we do have a pretty good handle on...
Absolutely. Yes.
And so we're trying to match the production capacity of Australia with future demand trends internationally.
So the companies themselves are trying to do that, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
but sorry, so is the government, through this investment, taking an interest in that?
Absolutely.
I assume that's where we're driving towards.
Absolutely, and a lot of this has come on the back of a massive increase in demand for timber in just about every area of timber use. Structural timber there is a serious shortage of structural timber out there at the moment, and as you would obviously realise, the lag times that are involved in starting, planting to production are significant, and so we are trying to get ahead of the curve as best we can by this plan, but it still is going to mean, I think, the world is going to be short of timber, and so the industry will remain fairly healthy for quite some time.
And so is that being reflected in the demand for pulp, or is it timber?
I think it's both, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
So pulp is needed for a range of products, and timber, as the Minister talked about, is needed for construction and furniture and a whole range of other things too. So there's increasing demand in both areas.
Actually, and one of the things that we're really keen to look at as part of this whole process is that a tree's not just a tree. There's bits of the tree that get used for various things, and so what we're trying to seek to do is to maximise the value of the use of every part of the tree. So, there's obviously the bit, everyone thinks of the bit that goes into a piece of furniture or goes into a timber truss, but don't realise that there's so much more of the tree that can be used for pulping. But there are some really exciting new bioproducts that we can be looking at with the residues that we're getting from either forest management or from the offcuts from when we process the log. And we're thinking that one of the most important things is that we maximise the value of every piece of the tree, and that we make sure that we have a use for every piece of the tree, because not only does that maximise the economic return, but it also deals with an issue of, what do you do with this stuff if it's not being used? So there's been a lot of research into possible uses for things that in the past have just been wasted.
So with...
Senator Brocken, you have your time is almost up.
Is it?
Yes.
Can I ask one more? Would something like, for example, there's been work towards for a number of years a biomass electricity plant in my hometown of Manjimup up in the southwest of WA. Would that fall under the sort of investment that the government's would that have the potential to be a part of the forestry industry plan going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there has already been a body of work done about what kind of critical mass of product that you would require to create an efficient, an efficient energy generation through wood. But I mean, one of the things that we need to be really clear about here is that we're talking about offcuts and we're talking about thinnings and the like. So there is quite a body of work that's already been done on that, and it would certainly make sure. I'm happy to make it available.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. Thank you, Jess. Senator Ross.
Thank you. I'll just ask a few questions. Continuing on the discussion about the industry plan, with the $20 million, I mean, the ABARES statistics this morning reinforced the fact that we've got 87% of our wood production coming from plantations. Is that $20 million being spent reflective of the importance of the plantation industry compared with the native forest-based industry? And what proportion of that $20 million will be supporting plantation-based industries?
Okay. Well, I can't give you that breakdown off the top of my head, because some of the details that would inform that answer have yet to be decided. But what I would say is that quite clearly the number one issue that the industry has identified as a barrier to growth has been the number of trees that they've got access to. And so fundamentally underpinning this plan will be providing the incentive for people to plant more trees.
Well, perhaps can you take on notice doing more of a breakdown of how it's expected that $20 million is going to be spent?
Well, you can be like me on the 12th of September if you'd like to come to the press club. I'm quite sure that you'll be delighted to be one of the first people to see what it is. But until such time as we have developed through the absolute detailed specifics, we've finished our consultation, I can't give that. I can't say I can take it on notice, because the decisions that surround that have not been made. The decisions around what the priority areas of development are, and as I said, it's about getting more trees, the right trees in the right place. That is our objective here. and how that plays out will be determined.
So we've got $1.5 million being spent in the next financial year, 5.4 in 1920. So you're saying there's not a specific allocation or suggested projects that money's going to be going for? There must be some basis on why there's that breakdown.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's obviously been some broader work done to inform the budget process, so to make sure that we had as much detail as we could, but the actual details, the kind of detail that you're obviously asking for, is not available because it's still a work in progress and there's still a lot of consultation that needs to undergo.
So what are the sorts of projects in broad areas that are informing that allocation of 1.5 million in the next financial year and then 5.4 in the financial year after that?
So that was so it was general information was provided for that 20 million. With the agreement that the plan was yet to be written and completed, and so that how that funding would be used could be tweaked based on the outcomes of the plan.
But there must be some basis for that level of allocation.
Absolutely. and as I answered earlier, when we talked about the research and development and the regional hubs, etc., that was the level of information we have on how the 20 million will be allocated.
So that 5.4 is reflecting establishing the regional hubs, is it?
No, so you're looking at the breakdown per year, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
So no, we aren't doing like the regional hubs just in 1 year. These things are spread over multiple years. So there's we're looking at work in the farm forestry, Indigenous forestry and private native forestry space, the research and development with potentially additional hubs of the National Institute for Forest Products Innovation, the regional hub work we talked about earlier about looking at what infrastructure and plantations and forestry assets are in a region and doing an assessment of what is missing or what other opportunities need to be considered to enable that region to grow.
Okay. Well, going to farm forestry in particular, so what proportion of that funding is going to be put towards farm forestry?
Again, that will be determined once we have the final plan.
But there must be some estimates. Again, I'm getting to you've got a particularly specific, 1.5, 5.4, 4.9, 4.7 over the forwards. So I'm interested to know what proportion is going to be going to farm forestry and what sort of activities are envisaged in the farm forestry space.
Senator, for budget forecasting, we are required to put in numbers in the budget that add up to total amount. And when I look at the figures, which is how we do most of our budget planning, when the forestry plan's not going to be announced to September, that's quarter of the way through the financial year. Clearly, we're not going to spend a lot of money in the first year, so there's a smaller amount there. The second year, when things kick off, there'll be a peak in expenditure, then it levels off. The level of sophistication, as Ms Lauder has said, is roughly at that level at the moment. Spend a little bit, spend more, spend a lot more. How that's split up will depend on the consultation between now and September. And so while the numbers look precise because they have to add up to the total amount of money, the work underneath it will take place, and there might even need to be some tweaking of that as the budget rules allow.
Well, what sort of projects are envisaged in the farm forestry sector? Where is the money going to be spent?
Some of the things we've been thinking about, as with the earlier questions, we don't know where all the existing farm forestry assets are. So looking at inventory or stock take of that might be part of it. We have feedback from a number of farmers that they have actually established farm forestry plots on their land, but they don't know what to do next. Like, how do they get it harvested? How do they get it into the market? So we're also thinking about what kind of information and guidance they need, and whether there's a need for actual facilitation and advice, which is what I was talking about when we talked about funding through the states to help provide some of that. So they're the sorts of things we're thinking about at this stage, but it will be locked in once we actually have the final plan.
Okay, thank you.